It's time. It's time I tell that story that I don't think I've ever told anybody on social media. It's time I tell the story about how I almost ended it all for myself. I don't think anybody really knows this story. I don't even think my family knows this story. So, I mean, fucking surprise, Sade. This is a serious topic, and I'm not trying to make light of the situation whatsoever. But I don't know why I never told this story. I think it's a very uncomfortable story, and I think I'm still trying to process how I was feeling in those moments, and if I really even would have actually gone through with what I was thinking of doing. And I guess there's a piece of me, and maybe this is trauma related, but there's a piece of me that wants to water down my feelings and invalidate my own feelings, and that's what I consistently do. But I did a thing on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, you should be, where people can say or ask anything that they want, and it's completely anonymous. And somebody asked me what my worst day was, and it brought up a memory of mine where I could have, let's just say that I could have absolutely and thought about absolutely ending it all for myself, i.e. killing myself. I'd reached a very low point in my life. And to be honest, I think that's why I'm so behind now at 33 years old. I'm just figuring out what I want to do with my life. I'm just really getting started, and I'm okay with where I'm at. But when I look back, I recognize that the reason why I am where I'm at right now, and other people who are my age are so much further along, is because I dealt with a lot of trauma, relationship trauma, and I think I'm still unpacking a lot of that. You know, when you're in a toxic, abusive relationship for years upon years, it does tend to change your brain composition, right? And that sort of chipping away at you, and that sort of dumbing you down and continually making yourself feel small for another person to feel big, does a number on you and your brain composition, you know? So I think it, honestly, I genuinely think it delayed me a little bit. I think I delayed myself. I think I got in my way a lot. I can't just blame it on that situation. There's a lot that goes into it. I think I self-sabotaged a lot. But I'd reached a really low point in my life. My ex and I were we were talking. She was basically, you know, I touched on this story, the entire story of my ex, in I think like episode 2 of this podcast, right? So if you want to go back to that, you totally can. But we were broken up for 3 years, but for 3 years she genuinely had me on a leash. And was actually, I think that was probably when she was the most abusive, and the most unkind was during that 3-year period. But when you're consistently experiencing that for 3 years, it takes a toll on you. And so something had happened where I was towing the line with her because I genuinely wanted to be back with her, and she was just keeping me on a leash, like dangling me on a string, basically. for 3 years this went on. And I think a year and a half into this dangling, I genuinely had convinced myself, or maybe she had convinced me or gaslit me, whatever it was, that something was that the needle was going to move. And so I just needed to stay put and hang on and hold on to this person and continue dealing with the shit I was dealing with, because that was my karma for hurting her, or, I was convinced of this. And then I was also convinced that if I was doing it, she was doing it. You reach this level when you're in a very abusive, toxic relationship. You reach this level of delirium where you actually think, it's really like when you're being gaslit, like that's what it is. It is delirium. The person purposely makes you feel delirious, and your sense of reality becomes skewed because it's a false reality. And so my reality at the time was that I was going to wait around and toe the line and do whatever I had to do and cut off friends and not date, even though I was single. I was going to still hone in all of my energy onto her so that she knew, so that I could prove to her how much I wanted her and how worthy I was of her love, all the while continuing to be pushed down and pushed down and pushed down and pushed down and made to feel like I was not good enough. And again, even a year and a half of this sort of abuse really takes a toll on somebody. And so I'd found out at this particular moment in time that I thought that she wanted to work things out, because I figured, you're stringing me. At the time, it wasn't you're stringing me along. At the time, it was you're keeping in contact with me. You don't want me to talk to anybody else. You're still telling me what to do. So that obviously means you want to be with me. Obviously means you don't want to be with anybody else if you don't want me to be with anybody else. That was my train of thought. And then I had found out. Now, keep in mind, I was in a very fragile place at this point, because I was in the thick of the abuse that I was dealing with. And listen, when I say abuse, I mean abuse. Like, I'm not over exaggerating. She might still say to this day, like, that's an over exaggeration. It's not. It's abuse. It was gaslighting. It was abuse. It was emotional abuse. There's no other way around it. Does it mean she's a bad person? No. I see the divinity in everybody, and I don't think she's a bad person at all. And I wish her the best in life. But I wish her the best in life very far away from me. For the rest of her life and mine. Because, I had a second go around with her and just realized that sneaky games it's just a part of what she does. And again, does it make her a bad person? No, that's just what she does and how she deals with situations. That's not good enough for me. So I cut it off right after my grandmother passed away in March. Probably around April, May was when I was like, you know what? I'm sensing some unhealthy patterns from you, and you gotta go. And so I cut her off. But anyway, going back to the story at hand, yes, this was a very abusive situation. And when you are in that situation, if anybody knows anything about being in that sort of toxic abuse situation, you are left very vulnerable is not even a word, bare, completely stripped of your own skin. You don't know who you are anymore. I wish I could explain it in a way that could actually allow another person who's never experienced it to somewhat experience it. But then at the same time, I would never want anybody to experience that sort of feeling. And so I was left in this really raw and vulnerable place, cut off from my support system, because I was made to believe that my support system were all pieces of shit, toxic pieces of shit that were worthless. And so I started to believe this about the people around me. And so I started to distrust the people around me, because remember, the only person you can trust is me. The only person who's good for you is me. Everybody else is this and that and whatever. And so I started to believe it. And while I will say there are definitely some codependency issues with me and my family that have yet to, they're unraveling as we speak. My family is not toxic. Annoying, yes. Immature, absolutely. Toxic, untrustworthy, no. If I needed any single one of my family members, they would be there in a heartbeat. And I still to this day have trust issues with them because of everything. Maybe not. I mean, I think it goes beyond that situation, but I think it's residual trust issues, even with my mom and like my sister and stuff. Anywho, so I had found out that she was, I don't know, she went on a date with somebody, and that just completely, when you are that vulnerable and that much of a codependent state, it just completely threw me over the edge. And so my mother and my aunt were living here. My aunt was living here at the time, and I was doing music heavily at the time. And I had taken a sabbatical from the job that I was working at. My mental health was just down the drain at this point. Like, in every sense of the word, I was at a job that I was miserable at, that would give me anxiety and panic attacks, literally sitting in the fucking parking lot of this place. I literally had gotten to the point where I was debilitated. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't go to the job. So I had no choice but to take a fucking sabbatical, right? And then throughout that sabbatical, I was like, okay, well then I want to hone in on my creativity and really the things that I love while I have this time out of work to try and really get myself back together. And so I was going all in with music and writing and all of that. And I was doing shows, and I was writing for this person, and I was writing for that producer, and it was great on the outside. But I was dying on the fucking inside because of everything. My mental health was just like, it was nowhere to be found. I was in the deepest, darkest trenches of depression that you could think of. The Tori that you see in front of you, if you're watching this on video on YouTube, the Tori you see in front of you was not that Tori. Two different, completely different fucking people. Physically, I was in the worst shape of my life. Mentally, I was in the worst shape of my life. And everything in between. So I found out that, she was keeping her options open. And now after 3 years of dating somebody and like complete loyalty to a person and really genuinely, wholeheartedly wanting to work things out with her, finding out that person that you think is doing the same thing that you're doing and like that y'all are going to work things out, it just kind of throws you over the edge, especially when you've purposely endured all of the abuse that they've thrown your way. It just threw me for a complete curveball, and I snapped. And I took all of my music equipment, my laptop, everything. I didn't tell anybody where I was going. I got in my car. Not even a change of clothes. I cried the entire way, 3 hours drive to Connecticut, to a hotel that me and her used to stay in. When we were together, we would stay at this particular hotel in Connecticut just to get away for like the weekends or whatever, because we were both very busy when we were together, working full time, in school full time, both of us. So like we would go to this hotel and just get away. And I booked, I literally just same day booked a room at this hotel, told nobody where I was going. I just left my house, like, out the back door. Nobody knew where the fuck I was going. Nobody knew where I was. They just assumed I was in my room. And I had every intentions on, I don't know what I intended on doing. I had every intention on drinking myself into a coma. I can tell you that. As far as dying, as far as killing myself, to me, I was playing Russian roulette, and I was okay with that. I had every intentions on drinking a bottle to my face by myself, and and really just rolling the dice, and whatever happened was gonna happen. I had made a video about it, and because at the time I was doing YouTube, and I had a channel that I was growing. Like, the channel now, it's so stupid, I don't even use it, has 51,000 subscribers, and I do nothing with it now. But I was building that channel at the time, and I'd made a video, just literally sitting in front of this camera, fucking crying, just upset. I just laid it all bare on camera, and I still have the video in my Google Drive, and I don't know, maybe I'll share it on Patreon, just so y'all can get the raw footage. I definitely don't want to show it to the public, so if you're a patron, maybe I'll share that with you guys. It is a rough video to watch, because you can see how defeated and sad I was. But I think it's necessary to watch, because doing that was basically what saved me. Like, I ended up not drinking that night. I ended up calling my dad, I think, and telling him, like, this is my location, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing. Don't tell anybody I'm here. I'll be all right. And I scared him, and obviously he didn't listen. I think he did tell my mom where I was. I scared my family a lot, but I chose to do the right thing by the grace of God, by whatever it was, by my own willpower, my own innate intuition to stay on this planet for whatever fucking reason. I really wanted to die. I wasn't at the point where, this is why I don't say, like, attempted suicide. Like, I don't say that ever. Whenever I talk about it, I just don't say that. And, like, the reason why I don't say it is because I don't classify it as that. It was just me reaching a really low point in my life and wanting to not be here anymore, but not actually taking, maybe it was like a passive attempt. I know there are different types of attempts, and I'm not trying to trigger anybody, but I definitely think it's something that I've been avoiding talking about, because it's embarrassing. It makes me feel weak as a human being. Not now. Well, yeah, maybe a little bit. I know that I'm not the same person that I was when I was in that position, and thank God for that. Thank God that I grew and learned from all of that and everything that I've ever gone through, and that shit just made me a stronger person. But it is something that is embarrassing for me to talk about, because I feel as though, like, I guess there's a piece of me that still beats myself up for allowing somebody else to take that sort of mental and emotional control over me. Like, I relinquished my control to another person, so much so that their actions affected me wanting to potentially not be here anymore. And I think when you go through trauma, your feelings are consistently dumbed. I don't even think I've told my therapist this. Maybe in the very beginning. But, one thing I've learned by being in therapy, and this is one of the reasons why I'm going into social work, because my therapist is a social worker and she fucking changed my life, One thing I've learned is that when you are a child of trauma and then an adult of trauma, part of that trauma is consistently being invalidated with your feelings. And so every single thing that I have gone through in my life, from dealing with my alcoholic stepmother who was very verbally and physically abusive, to being bullied in school, which was very verbally and physically abusive, and then being in a relationship as an adult with somebody who was mainly verbally abusive, but it had gotten physical at times. The consistencies that I see with those three is invalidation of feelings. And so every single thing, like I was invalidating until therapy, like this present day therapist that I have right now, I was dumbing down the trauma I went through with my stepmother, and having to deal from a very young age with an abusive alcoholic from the time I was 8 years old until the time I was old enough to say, Dad, I don't want to go to your house anymore. And it's still triggering to this day because my father still enables her, and she's still very much so an active addict, and she's been to rehab 3 times this fucking year and has not stuck. And she's still abusive, and she's still in that abusive cycle, and my father still does nothing about it. And so it's triggering even as an adult to see it, and it honestly makes me resent my father, right? But what I'm trying to say is you're so invalidated when you go through all that trauma that you invalidate yourself. You learn to invalidate yourself. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Nothing's that big of a deal. Alcoholic stepmother who was verbally and physically abusive, not that big of a deal, because that's what I was fucking told by them. That's what I was told by her. Still to this day, she can't admit that she abused us. I mean, I've confronted her. It's happened. Whatever. Maybe I'll tell that story. But I think that's what I'm doing here, is invalidating the fact that that was a very traumatic experience, and I was in a very vulnerable and raw place, and I felt like I had nobody, because essentially I didn't know how to spread my wings, because my wings were clipped by somebody who wanted control over me and had every ounce of it. And I did want to die. I didn't want to be here, and it's crazy when I think about it, because, then at that point, like, I think to myself, there was once a time in my life where I didn't want to be here. And now I'm at a place in my life where I'm grateful that I stayed. I'm grateful that I still had that voice left in my head to say, no, Tori, you don't really want to do this. You just feel like there's no way out of this situation. But if you just hold on a little longer, Tori, I promise you, things are going to get better. You're going to meet new people. You're going to fall in love again. You're going to, the life will be breathed back into you, and I've met people along the way who breathed that life into me. And without those people, I wouldn't have gotten through it. I rebuilt my support systems, and I rebuilt my relationships with certain people, and then other people, I left those relationships where they stood, because to be honest, she was right about a couple people. You know what I'm saying? So, it's like it's like if you have a bowl filled with M&Ms, and one of them is a marble, and you take a handful, you're gonna, or like a couple of them are marbles, and you take a handful of those marbles, all right, you're bound to get maybe one in there, right? So like, was it like, oh, she was right because she was looking out for my best interest? No, it was, she was right just because she was picking off every single person in my life that was around me. And so she just happened to have gotten it right a couple of times. But the point I'm trying to make is, and I guess the reason why I think it's time for me to make this episode is because I'm trying to accept it. Not accept it. I mean, it happened years ago. What was it? 2017. I'm trying to own it, right? Like, okay, Tori, that was where you were. And this is where you are now. And it's okay. It's okay that you got to that point. It's okay that you had reached such a low point in your life that for a split second, didn't think there was any other way out other than just dying. And it's okay that there was a piece of you that did that as a cry out for not attention, but a cry out for help, because you felt like you had nobody and no support system, right? I've lost people in my life. I've lost my grandmother. I've lost my best friend. Like, let's be fucking real, guys. Y'all know that I lost my best friend at some point. Somebody who meant a whole heap of a lot to me, right? She was one of the people who did breathe life back into me. And I've refrained from talking about it because, for a time, it just didn't feel right to talk about it. But fuck it, this is my show. And there's, I have no intentions on saying anything bad. I have only good things to say about her, actually. But I lost her, and that was a big loss in my life. That friendship going away was huge to me. And in some instances, I still feel it to this day, like the loss of that friendship. I think I'll always feel it. But what has always gotten me through, even with, and I would say, honestly, even losing that best friend, I'm not going to say a name. Y'all can fucking speculate all you want. But even losing that best friend was probably more painful and left more of a fucking void than losing my ex. Because when I lost my ex and the ties were finally severed, I lost somebody who abused me. I lost somebody who was trying to control me. I lost the shackles. And so essentially, and again, it's nothing against her, but essentially losing that person made me start to see my freedom. Like, holy shit, wait a second. I can live my life the way that I want to, right? And then losing that best friend was different. That was just simply losing my best friend, losing my support system, losing my rock, my person. And so it was more impactful in my life. But the reason why I didn't, get to a point with that loss where, yeah, I fucking went through a depression. Yes, I had a really rough time. Yes, a lot of my anxieties and panic attacks were due to losing that person, right? And the depression and not dealing with losing the loss of that person. But at the end of the day, the reason why I didn't get to a point of like, I want to end it all is because I had a support system. I had my other best friends to lean on. I had other friends to talk to about my feelings. I had my therapist who obviously gave me the tools I needed to like just carry on. I had my mother. I didn't cut anybody off, right? And so I say all of this to say that as much as what I went through was serious, and nobody should ever make another person get to that low, right? I understand that it does happen. And I think we need to recognize that our support systems are probably the most important thing. They're our first line of defense. And without them, it would be a lot harder to dig ourselves out of a ditch. So when somebody's reaching out a helping hand, you fucking take it. That's not the point of this podcast. I wanted to just tell my story and let y'all know, like, I am nowhere near where I used to be. I have a long way to go, like career-wise and things like that. Well, maybe not a long way. I'm like 3 fucking years. But, I mean, some people might think that's a long time. But, like, I have a ways to go before I get to where I want to be career-wise, right? But I'm taking the steps every single day. I am nowhere near mentally and emotionally where I was. I still have a lot of work to do with that, like boundaries with people, right? Setting boundaries, speaking my truth, speaking up when somebody does something to me that is unfair or unjust. That's something I'm working on every single fucking day in multiple situations. When people are trying to take advantage of my energy or use me for this or use me for that, I try to just, instead of avoid, I try to speak up, right? So I'm nowhere near, my therapist would be yelling at me right now for saying this. I've come a long way. And I'm so proud of the progress that I've made. And I'm so, even from last year, even from this time last year, I was in a very vulnerable state this time last year. Y'all, losing my best friend, like, nobody gets it. Because why would I fucking talk about it? I didn't eat for 2 fucking weeks. Like, I did not put 1 ounce of food in my mouth for 2 weeks. I lost 10 pounds in 1 week. I remember like going to one of my friends' houses and she was like, are you good? And I was like, I can't fucking eat. I literally I try to put food in my mouth and I can't. That's where I was last year. Maybe a little bit over a year. I'm not there anymore. Now I'm working on, okay, can I get to that point where I'm not eating anymore? You know what I'm saying? So this podcast episode is really just, if you're in a sticky spot, if you're in a place where you're you don't have the foresight to see the road ahead or see the light at the end of the tunnel, keep on fucking going. Why would you stop in hell? Why would you stop there? Keep going. Because shit does get better. Even when you think that it's the end of your fucking world and you'll never come back from it, it gets better. It's so cliche, but it fucking does. Life, let me say it like this. Life is like a wave. We experience life in waves. And sometimes we feel like we're drowning. And that is undoubtedly true, right? But you just have to trust that when you're in a downturn, that just like the waves of the ocean, that go in and come back out, and vice versa, and vice versa, and go out and come back in, and they continue to do that. And no matter who's swimming in the ocean or who's watching, the tide is going to do that. That's what life is like. Our moments in life are like the tides of the ocean. 1 minute it's high, next minute it's low. And so that person asked me, what was the lowest point in your life? What was the saddest day? What was the worst day of your life? I don't think about the worst day of my life. I don't have a worst day of my life. I have a lot of best days though. And I think about those days. And I hold on to those days. And so that's all I wanted to say. That's my story. Let me know, what do y'all want to hear from me? Like, what questions do you guys have about this, about anything else? I'm ready to just talk about the shit. Let me know. I love you guys very much. If you're interested in coaching or anything like that, go to my website, torifranco.com. I have packages. You can try me out. We can set up a discovery call free of charge. It's 15-20 minute discovery call. It's over the phone. Just, if you're interested in coaching but you don't want to commit to anything yet, I have that. Email me, tori@torifranco.com, if you are interested in a discovery call. I'm here. I love you guys very much, and I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace out.